In the world of college football that you've spent your career in, have you noticed any change around how things stick, as you just said, as we have entered relatively unprecedented waters with the landscape that is transfer portal, pay for play, roster shakeup seemingly by the year, if not by, the month within the sport that we love?
Yes. Yogi, I think one of the major things I've seen is there's more inconsistent play and there's more upsets. I think part of that's the transfer portal. Everybody can get a quarterback.
Yep.
Everybody can get a new tailback. He might not even be on their roster the last time you saw him play. So the smaller schools, the group of fives, they can get some good players that you don't know about. So you see more of them upsetting you. So that's one thing. The other thing is there's more distractions for the players. You've got agents. We never had agents. We fought for years to keep agents out of the sport. That social media is at an all-time high. And whether we like it or not, there's an addiction with kids on the phone, on their iPads. I mean, I'm watching our kids at lunch, and I ate lunch with them every day for 6 years. There's 6 of them sitting at a table, none of them talking to each other. They're all on their phone. And I'd laugh and come up and look over their shoulder and say, "What are you looking at?" What do you mean? I mean, they're so into it they don't even know you're in the room. And then you've got to make them lock in when they come in that room. But so you've got agents talking to them. You've got their agents talking to other agents while they're on the team about joining another team because you're not getting enough playing time and you can get more money, which used to be tampering. There is no tampering anymore. They don't even talk about that. You've got parents with agents talking to them and third parties, which we've always had third parties, but now we've got agents. And you've got what's next for me. So I may transfer 4 times. I may transfer 5 times. So you don't have the loyalty for that university. You don't have the loyalty for that team. You and I had the guys in our wedding and best friends, and we're losing some of that because of the transfer portal. So all of those things are making the game more inconsistent, I think, than ever. How do you see an Alabama get ahead of Georgia 30-3 or whatever it is, and then Georgia come back the second half? I mean, how do you see a Vanderbilt upset in Alabama? How do you see us lose to a James Madison and have 8 turnovers? I mean, you can't do those things, and those are things that we didn't see a few years ago. So I just think with all of the stuff that's going on, there's more distractions than ever before.
Ready, set. Use French fries to go. Yeah, oil from French fries. Turn yesterday's leftovers into today's fuel. More power, lower emissions. 76 renewable diesel fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating conversation because, yeah, players, you told me this a long time ago, and I have quoted you, Coach, every time I bring it up, where I say, the great Mack Brown has told me that college football is about the players and the fans, and it's become about the media and the money. But the same things still win. You have to have culture. You have to have connectivity. You have to have trust. Obviously, scheme and talent, of course, get you in the door. I'm worried about some of those things eroding. And I love that the players are being compensated and taken care of and all the things that we've talked about over the course of time. But what I'm scared about is that the lesson learned that I learned at Pitt, that you learned many times, that you taught many times around, hey, man, when it gets hard, like lean into it. Hey, when it's a challenge, there's a beautiful lesson on the other side. I worry about that. And that's, I think, been echoed a lot in college football. I'm curious if you'd agree, like, how would you change it, knowing what you've just lived through as your time as the head coach in North Carolina?
Yeah, we're having kids give up too fast and leave too fast, and that really bothers me. I've talked to guys like Michael Jordan and about NIL, and they said, I got it. I'm okay with players getting money, and they didn't ask for it. We gave it to them, and we should have done it 30 years ago when you and I were getting $15 checks for laundry money. But you've got to earn something, and you got to fight through some stuff. That's life. And we can't control what happens in our life. We can control how we fight through it and how we handle it. And we're not doing that as much now. We're saying, I don't like that coach anymore, so I'm quitting. I'm just leaving. And I know we had calls from agents about players on other teams we were playing during the season that wanted to come to us. And that's just not who we've been. So what do we do about it? I think we've got to get more of an NFL model, Yogi, because we don't have a model. We made decisions without looking at the consequences, and it's gotten us in trouble. We had the transfer portal, which sounded like a good idea. Joe Burrow wouldn't have been able to win a national championship or the Heisman Trophy if he'd been the third string quarterback at Ohio State. I'm okay with that. But don't be buying starters off teams and tampering. So the transfer portal and NIL collided, and they've made a mess. Then the transfer portal during the bowl games is a mess. I mean, the whole Marshall team decided they didn't want to play, or they're all transferring. There wasn't enough. The Penn State backup quarterback sees the starter's going to come back, so I'm going to leave right in the middle of the playoffs, and he's playing. So that's a difficult thing. We've got to handle that. There's 2 windows, but the window after spring practice has not been a window where there's much left because everybody sets their team for spring practice. If you put it after the playoffs are so late now. Most of the schools have started. So it's too late for a transfer to get in the portal and get in that school. So it's a problem, and we've got to get a lot of smart people in one room with Congress and with the NCAA and with the commissioners and with somebody that needs to be in charge of all this, with the AFCA, with Craig Bowl, and get somebody. So a lot of smart people can say, okay, let's figure this out. We got some really stupid things that we're doing. We need collective bargaining. We need a salary cap. How can we give these guys $10 million, $12 million to sign out of high school when you don't even know if they're going to be any good? Yeah. And it's not fair to the boosters because they've got booster fatigue. They're tired. We're asking them for season ticket money. We're asking them money for buildings, facilities. We're asking them money for NIL, for at North Carolina, 28 sports. It's not fair. You get fatigue. I said the guys got caller ID. They're going to quit picking up the phone when they see your number coming. And the portal cost twice as much this year for kids as it did last year. Yeah. So it's going to keep coming up. And Yogi, I even had a coach tell me, and I will not say who it was, at a prominent program that's doing really well in basketball and football. And he said their AD brought him in 3 years ago when NIL started and said, okay, for the first time in the history of college sports, we can buy players. So I'm going to get you as much money as I possibly can because they're going to wake up and change these rules at some point. And I want us to be so good and so far ahead at that point that the others can't catch up. So you go get the best players you can get, and I'm going to pay for them. And those are the ADs that have been aggressive and forward-thinking, and they're 6 of those teams with those type ADs and that type money are the ones that ended up playing for the national championship in the end.
It was interesting. So I cover games for the Big Ten Network and Fox, and I tracked the playoff. I won't say which game I was at. Anybody could surmise if they tracked me throughout the postseason. But I was at midfield, and I talked to both GMs of a team in a game. And we were having a conversation around, God, how are you keeping your roster intact? And one of the GMs I'm buddies with, and I was like, you're having that conversation? Like, you're one of the bluest bloods of bluest bloods. And they're like, we know. Like, it's just kind of a gnarly world. So I want to give you a theory that I have. And because of your recency of being a head coach at Carolina, I'm curious if you would poke holes in it or disagree or agree with it. Okay. So player X, I'll give a real-time example. Jordan Addison went to Pitt. I went to Pitt. I played wide receiver at Pitt. Love my institution. He went to Biletnikoff at Pitt. Transfers out to USC in that spring portal window that you referenced. Spent the season at USC. Was a first-round pick. Didn't win the Biletnikoff. Wasn't an All-American. Was a hell of a player. Great player for them. But in a litany of USC wide receivers, is not Keyshawn, is not Marquise Lee. Like, he's far down the line. Middle of the road, you might argue, or top third, whatever you want to say. Really talented player. Here's my positioning, is that at the place he left, where he was going to be a legend, it's going to be a long time, I think, before they really fall back in love with him. And the place he went to, he was there for such a short period of time that he really was an elite player, but he was a transaction. And when I do media training with players, I do pretty regularly. I say, look, you already wear a helmet. You're already a ranking, and now you're a transaction. So we have to compete to tell your story so people can not only lean into the human, but also show up for the human when your career is over. And I wonder, my theory is the support of an athletic department or of a fan base eroding for players when they come in for a season or for a half of a year? Or do I just need to accept what reality is? And no, alumni bases are still going to change, and they're just going to love on whatever player shows up within their facility.
Yeah. Well, number one, Jordan Addison beat us, so I'm fully aware of how good he was.
He's talented.
He was a great player. Number two, we had Omarion Hampton this year, maybe the best running back in the country. He was in that group. And we had Kamen Rucker, who was fourth in the country in pressures and sacks last year. They both got offered 3-4 times as much money to leave, just like Jordan, and they decided to stay. Drake May, year before, got offered 4 times as much money to leave. He decided to stay. I said, why'd you stay? We trust you. We want to have a home when we get through. We want to have a place to come back to. And that's why these kids should be loyal to their school. That little bit of money that they're going to make for going to other schools, that erases the memory, the hard work, the influence that they had at their current school is gone. And Yogi, coaches have trouble finding a place to quit and retire, and because it usually doesn't end well. Players the same way. Drake May said, Coach, I'm going to live in Charlotte. I'm going to be coming back to Charlotte. So I'm not going anywhere. And I told our collective, you guys need to pay him some. Now, they're not paying him near as much. Like Omarion, he turned down $1.3 million to get $300,000. Wow. But his dad said, I know you, I trust you. If he's going to make any money, it's going to be after he gets out of here anyway. So one of the things I'm worried about, Yogi, is the families that are taking a check from NIL, and it's a good check, but not enough for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And they're changing some of the things. Could Jordan have gotten a better job through Pittsburgh and had a place to go back the rest of his life and been one of the best receivers in the history of Pittsburgh as compared to being a guy at USC that stayed there for 4 months? I mean, those are things that we're seeing happen that I don't think are best for kids.
Yeah.
And that makes it tough. It does make it tougher for a fan base. Now, we know winning's a disease. It's an addiction. So people are going to still follow, but they're going to get more frustrated. I looked up, I think it was the other night, and I saw Kentucky's got 13 new basketball players. Last year in the Final Four, the 2 teams, those teams were all new. And nobody even knew who the players were. So it's different. And I've always said this, and you just said it, it's about the kids first, and it's about the fans second, because without either one of them, we don't have anything. We don't have a game. And then the parents are part of that fan base and that kid. And even with the playoffs now, we're having them travel 12 games, 15 games. It's so much more than ever before. So now we're going to have to start paying them more money to be able to travel. So we've got to look at what's best for the people that are keeping our game alive and keeping it for what it is. And we can't just get so greedy where we had the number 1 APR in the ACC. We were tied with Northwestern for number 3 in the country. Nobody cared. Yeah. Nobody cared. Right. At one point when you and I were playing and coaching, everybody talked about graduation rates. Even punished you if the graduation rate wasn't good enough. Well, when guys transfer, they've got about a 63% chance to transfer. If you transfer 4 times, you're not going to graduate. And so what happens to graduation rates? So how many of these kids that get a little money up front for NIL, but transfer 4 times are going to end up on the streets? They're not going to have a degree. They're not going to have a job. And then we're going to be getting into mental health issues and see some really sad situations. And that's what I'm worried about more than anything else.